and welcome to the keynote for What Automation Means to Cisco. My name is Kervin Pillay, and I'm the CTO of automation in the Mass Scale Infrastructure Group. Today, what I want to share with you is a bit of a vision around what this means for Cisco and where we're going with automation. So in order to set the stage, we really need to understand what the macro factors are that service providers are experiencing today. And we can break this down roughly into some technical factors and some external macro factors that are prevalent in the market. Probably the biggest thing that we see is that the demand for bandwidth is exploding anywhere you look because of applications, because of new services, because of the way that customers are consuming these services ever more on a day-to-day basis. What that means for service providers is that they need to think about how to support these increasing amounts of bandwidths, increasing amounts of applications that we see on a daily basis. The evolving environment, however, means that there's new competitors coming into this market all the time. These new competitors don't have any of the legacy that the traditional service providers have, and as a result are able to move quicker. What this means for existing service providers is that they need to think about how they deal with these new threats as they come along, these new opportunities that are being exposed to them by the new applications that are being demanded by consumers of the services, both new and old. The opportunities are huge, but what that means is service providers need to rethink the way that they plan and run their networks. Of course, it's impossible for us to continue putting OpEx into an existing network and expect that the price of the service is going to stay the same. So the amount of OpEx increases with the amount of bandwidth, with the amount of devices, with the number of services, with the number of applications that we see on the networks today. What this means is that service providers need to do network upgrades. These network upgrades typically take a very long time. And the reason for that is because service providers support such a vast array of services and have been doing for 20 to 25 to 30 years, regression testing on these types of network upgrades is a long and tedious process. Typically, this was done manually. It involved lots of people to look at whether the existing services worked, whether the new services were efficient. This, of course, doesn't even start to touch new technologies as they come along. We at Cisco have introduced segment routing relatively recently. And as we see more and more service providers migrate to using segment routing, it means that they need to rethink how they run their networks, who runs their networks, and what automation means for them in the bigger scheme of things. So complexity is really the problem that service providers experience today. And this is the problem that we're going to try and explain what the vision is for Cisco to try and solve these problems. If we look at automation, the thing that we really need to understand is that automation is actually not one thing. We can look at it as three different facets of automation. The first and probably the most important facet is visibility. We have to be able to see what's happening on the network. We have to be able to visualize the traffic flows on the network, the way that users are consuming the network. From that visibility, we can start to draw insights. What should I do with this information? What does it mean? How is it affecting the network? How is it affecting consumers? How is it affecting the application? Once we have that, we can then start to think about, well, what do we do with that information? How do we take action to make sure that we are running the most efficient network, that the consumer is experiencing the best service that they can possibly experience? So if you look at these three facets of automation, all of these things are important, but starting with visibility is probably the most important thing. A lot of service providers today don't have the visibility that they need in the network. And we at Cisco are looking to how we can provide more of that visibility, exposing more of the metrics, exposing more of the information to service providers and users of the network to ensure that the decisions that are being made about the network are taken with absolute certainty about what the underlying network is doing. If we look at where the network was yesterday, we can roughly make this analogous to race cars of yesterday to race cars of today and potentially tomorrow. Previously, when there was a race car, there was one person in charge of everything, and I'm sure some of the service providers in the audience today will identify with this, where there was a key man dependency. there was only one person that ever knew everything about the network. Of course, that meant that the network was simple, as much as the race car was simple in the early days. If you look at race cars of today, practically impossible for one person to understand everything that's happening on the race car at any one point in time. When you look at the number of people that are required both at the racetrack and potentially back at the factory looking at the data, it's 10 to 20 times what it used to be when race cars were one man in the car driving around the track. So the complexity of networks is increasing. The amount of people that you require to operate this network is increasing. The amount of information that you're getting out of the networks is increasing to the point where it's practically impossible for any human or set of humans to look at a screen and figure out what the network is trying to do, where it's going, what changes need to be made, who needs to make those changes, how quickly you need to make those changes. We have to rely on tools that understand the data, can pass through the data, make semantic sense of the data, and then give you insights, harking back to our 3 tenets of automation. And from those insights, understanding what we can do from an action perspective to change the network to make sure that we are running the most efficient race car and potentially running the most efficient network that we can run. So, with that as the backdrop, we need to think about how we as Cisco are going to solve these problems and allow service providers to consume automation in a way that's far friendlier than it has been before, but also has the impact that we need, where simply throwing people at the problem is an impossible task today. So if you look at action, visibility, and insights, which is the core of what we try to do, there's a couple of tenets that we at Cisco are building our automation solutions toward. And this is the vision that we have for how automation should be delivered in order for service providers to be successful. The first one is it has to be software defined. What we see is that service providers have existing tools. They want to interact with the network using APIs. They want to use existing portals and tools in order to visualize what's happening on the network. And for that to happen, they need to have software defined API access in everything that's happening in the network. So that's an important point that we at Cisco are building into all of the automation products and all of the infrastructure products as we evolve along this automation journey. The second one, and we've heard customers say this over and over again, that they want the flexibility and the ability to scale like hyperscalers allow their applications to scale in the cloud. Networking has traditionally been very difficult to get this right, but we at Cisco believe that we are in a position to be able to provide the tools to allow customers to scale up and down, deploy the applications and infrastructure that we provide, either in a hyperscale cloud, on premises, or some hybrid thereof, so that they can get the best and most efficient use of the infrastructure that we provide. The third one is multi-vendor and multi-domain. We know that in order for any service provider to be successful, they have to be able to support multiple vendors and support multiple domains because services exist across these multiple domains. You will see that Cisco's tools are built to support this multi-vendor, multi-domain future, both with the existing tools you on an NSO developer day to day, but also we've done some acquisitions of late that allow us to be more multi-vendor and multi-domain. The next one is both technical and commercial, where we're able to scale both technically and commercially to allow customers to consume the software how they need and require to at any point in time. And the last one is probably more longer term, which is how do we close this loop? How do we make this automation self-driving? How do we make it fully autonomous? And that's where we're going with the tools and the platforms that we're providing. And you'll see in the vision that Cisco has that all of these tools, as they come together, allow a service provider to be far more autonomous in the way that they operate networks. And this is going to be a game changer. The ability to scale up without scaling people by deploying automation in the right way, that's the way that we see the future. So I'd like to thank you and wish you all the luck for NSO Developer Days, and I'll hand you back to Nicholas.
Hello everyone, hope you're enjoying Developer Days. My name is Elsin Demir. I've been working at Cisco for almost 3 years as a DevOps engineer, making sure NSO is tested properly in many different aspects. We aim to deliver a high quality and secure product to NSO users. Therefore, it's important for us to get your feedback about how you use NSO so that we can create better test cases to improve the quality of the product. Thank you.
Thank you, Kervin. A great opening. That was really interesting to understand the macro factors and how automation can help our customers manage complexity and reduce complexity. So great. Before we move into the live chat questions, I would like you to double click and maybe explain a little bit more about what Crossworks is and how NSO ties into that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nicholas. And I think that's an important question. We've got a set of products that we deliver as a platform called Crosswork. And within Crosswork, although there are many products, the idea is that all of these work well together to be able to help service providers solve specific use cases that they need to, depending on what they have at the moment. So it's really a collection of products that are delivered as a platform that is pre-integrated.
Okay, and where can you learn more about it?
I think it's cisco.com/go/crosswork is probably the best place to learn about that.
Yes, I mean, you'd be using the race car analogy. And the question is about how would you compare NSO in this analogy?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason why I use the race car analogy is probably important. It's as the complexity has increased, one of the things that has changed a lot in networks is the homogeneous nature of networks. So and NSO really shines in that perspective where it's able to talk to many different vendors using probably a lot of different protocols. But what that means is that we get access to all of the parts of the network via NSO. And when you do that, you do it via an abstracted interface. So the interface that you interact with NSO looks the same, i.e., the data looks the same, but how that gets executed, NSO does that behind the scenes. And I think it's a great abstraction to build towards.
Another question that I think is a good follow-up here is about the integration strategy. I think many people may be concerned about how you keep the consistent tools environment for a developer. Do you have a specific strategy around that?
Yeah, so we have a vision around how we're going to develop this, and I think it is still a work in progress where we are going to get better. The way that we're looking at this is that it should be simple enough for any developer to get started almost immediately, but they're not going to have to relearn the constructs as it becomes more and more complex and as they start to want to do more with the network. So one of the things that we're working on is trying to unify the way that you talk to all Crosswork products using the same methods, so that when you learn a specific Crosswork product, it becomes knowledge that you can translate to other areas. The integration will be done behind the scenes. So when you get to do an API call, you have to believe that what you're doing is consistent amongst all of the tools, because we'll get the right answer from you depending on where it needs to come from. So I think it is an important point to stress that the reason why we're calling this a Crosswork platform is that the integration is done for you by Cisco, so that as you plug in new components as the need arises, it becomes simple to actually consume, both as an end user and as a developer, in order to get the integration right.
So we have a question that is about how do you see that developer tools are evolving for developers, and what skills are needed in the future?
Yeah, so this is multi-pronged. I think the way that we see, call it the traditional network engineer evolving, is certainly some of them are getting far more development skills and learning how to interact with APIs, where in other parts of the service provider network or the service provider operations team, it has to be more GUI driven and potentially using existing tools that are in place. And ideally, what we want to do is try and provide, again, a consistent set of tools that allow you to interact with Crosswork platform very quickly. But if you need to go deeper, then you've got the APIs and the other portals and UIs that you can use to get the right information that you need. So I think it's a holistic approach to try and get everybody involved in the developer network.
Great, thank you. I think our time is up. Thank you for the presentation and Q&A.